Hello, my name is Jack Meyer. I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I'm interviewing Mr. John Mueller, Jr. on November 29th, 2006 at the Wyoming Branch Library. Our camera operator today is Diane Reif.
I'm a junior, by the way.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. I thought it said junior, but at any rate, is it, and I guess I should have asked, is Mr. Mueller?
I'll answer to anything.
Okay, well, at any rate, what we'd like to have you do is tell your story by spending a few minutes talking about your early years, where you grew up, where you went to school, how you came to be in the military, the training you had, and then where you served, and the things that you can remember during your service time, and after that, how did it affect the rest of your life? So just in chronological order, why don't you start with where you grew up?
Well, my home was originally Norwood, and in the early years, my father built a home in Pleasant Ridge. So by the time I was 18 years of age, I had attended Pleasant Ridge School, and I was attending Withrow High School. And when I became 18, it was my senior year, I asked deferment from the military. It was granted without any problems. They were very kind about that. So on the 15th of June, I graduated from Withrow. The 13th of July, I was wearing khakis. They didn't waste any time. How I reported to Fort Thomas and my activities over at Fort Thomas is a complete blur. I do not recall anything except having a lot of tests. The one test that I did get an answer on that I remember was they said, "I'm colorblind, I will not be in the Navy." And that didn't bother me one bit because I didn't like the water anyway, so I ended up in the Army. Then again, a blur. How I got to Camp Barkley, Texas. It was a medical replacement training center near Abilene, Texas, on the map, where we took all of our basic training. Now, our training had to be for all 5 branches of the service. It was artillery, infantry, so we had to do a lot of walking. And so that went along very well, and at that time I noticed there was a group of officers that had medical administrative corps officers. And my first reaction was, as a young 18-year-old, that's a deal to be in. So I went to the captain that one day, about halfway through our basic training, and I said, "I'd like to go to OCS." I didn't know what my scores were or anything else from the test. I'm completely naive about what's going on, and I was naive about what I was seeing by my comrades in there, their actions and everything else. It was a way of life I had never encountered before. But he said, "Wait a minute, soldier," and he went back and he pulled out some records. He said, "You're scheduled for more testing up at Camp Maxey to qualify possibly for ASTP." Well, I happen to know what that was because I had a cousin that was in the ASTP in Morgantown, West Virginia. So I said, "But if I don't pass those, what happens?" He said, "Then, soldier, you're back in the Army." Well, I was fortunate. I passed, and I ended up in an Army Specialized Training Program at Bloomington, Indiana, at Indiana University. And I have a shoulder patch here someplace that we used in those days. I don't know what I should have had that. Can you stop? Mm-hmm. So, thank you. This is a shoulder patch that we wore in ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program. And the slogan going around through the military was, "Mother, you take down your service flag, your son's in ASTP." Now, I don't know why they picked on us because the Navy V-12 was the same operation. But anyway, that was what we had. And it was a wonderful experience. I was getting an education of engineering. Supposedly 2 years we were going to pick up a graduate degree and be someplace in the Army as in the engineer corps. But things didn't go as well as they should have, I guess, in Europe, and they needed bodies, and they needed them bad. So they closed the program. The next thing I knew, I was down in Campbell, Kentucky. Amway, they have put out their own literature on the camp itself, which I was able to get, and they formed the 20th Armored Division, and this is the patch then that all armored had, triangular, with the number, in our case, number 20 on it. Well, we threw a lot of training down there, and I think it was rather a miracle. The government looked at my records and found out that I had medical basic training, and so they put me in the medical corps. I looked up to see if there was a star shining, but it was a miracle as far as I was concerned. And I was attached to the medical attachment of B Company of I think it was Combat Command C, but I wouldn't swear to that, but one of the commands. So our medical attachment worked with the Company B, or I'd worked with Company B throughout the entire war. In my vehicle, when we went overseas, included a fellow named Joe Fontana. He was from New York. A student like I was, a Lee Workman, who was a mortician from Joliet, Illinois. That was the three of us in our vehicle. Well, from Campbell, we got word to go to report, and we took the train, a very fine train. It had wicker seats with a potbelly stove at both ends for warmth, up to Camp Miles Standish. Camp Miles Standish, outside of Boston. And when we arrived, they had just had a snow, so we had to walk through snow. And I know it was up to our knees to break in, and they had two coal burning stoves at one at each end of the barracks. Of course, we had to start the fires. They weren't going at that time. And we spent, I think, about three or 4 days there, and then boarded the Thomas H. Berry. It was a cruise ship from the Caribbean Cruise Line, something like that. It was cold, real cold when we got decks were covered with ice. But we pulled out. I don't remember too much of the detail on that. We were out, I think, about 1 or 2 days, and we were hooked up with another convoy that came up from, they told us, from New York. As a result of that, there were 100 and some odd ships in our convoy, and plus a baby top for aircraft surveillance in case of a submarine. They couldn't attack the sub, but they could report it to the Navy, of course. And the worst thing about the whole trip was that it was a choppy North Atlantic, so everybody was sick, and all the johns were, the wood had been removed from all the johns for cleanliness purposes and the cleaning. So that porcelain got pretty doggone cold each time you had to use the bathroom. That's the one thing I remember about the trip. But anyway, we arrived 14 days later in Le Havre, and there we were greeted by, I don't remember now whether it was the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. Both of them were very, very prevalent in Europe, which we greatly appreciated. We went into a small town called Saint-André-sous-Calais, which is about 40 miles north of, or inland from Rouen. There we waited for our vehicles, and they eventually arrived at the point. And here I'm going to have to look at my division. The division put out a manual, and in that manual it talks about all the things that we did and what we saw and everything else with photographs. But this also shows our pattern of where we participated, and so I'll mention some of those cities to you. From Rouen, we moved into Cambral, Cambral, and then from there into near, up through, I can't even read, my eyesight's, it looks like AACTREN, and that's where we had our first combat experience with the Germans, and that was before we crossed the Cologne, over at Cologne. And then from there, we moved on south, chasing the Germans down the line. One thing that they have mentioned in this book that we saw was the bed chick Charlie was always bothering us around 6 or 6:30, and that was a German aircraft, which is Harrison. They wouldn't even fire on us. They would just Harris was coming in low. Then our anti-aircraft frequently shot them out of the sky, fortunately, but they bothered us. And then we went. Eventually, our object for what turned out to be the last major attack was, well, I should say before we went down there, there was another area that we took over, which was the one area I have problems with when I talk about it. It was so horrible. It was Dachau, the concentration camp. And we do have some pictures in here of, maybe you can pick them up from the book. I don't know if your camera or not. How the Germans could have been so cruel to the people, anybody, I don't understand. But it was the most horrible experience. The odor around there was just devastating.
Did your division liberate Dachau, or?
Yes, it took it over. And anyway, we moved on past that. But our last major battle was taking the airport at Munich. And the interesting thing about that is that I think the 42nd Infantry was also had joined us at that time. And I could be wrong, but you're dealing with a geriatric set, as you know. I think it was the 4th. And somebody I had known in high school, and I've been trying to recall his name ever since, said, "Hi, Jack." And he was with the other outfit. So we talked for about 20 minutes, and then they moved on. But that's where I believe I lost my hearing, because our tankers had moved up close to our outfit and overnight and started a bombardment in the morning. And of course, those fellows were hearing med, but we on the ground didn't have it. So that's where I lost my hearing. But we took over the airport at Munich, and then decided we would service the vehicles for the trip down to Salzburg. Well, on the way down to Salzburg, all the way, all those airplanes that were at the Munich airport, the German aircraft, all had their guns loaded. They were minus one thing: gasoline. The Germans had been running out of gas. So we took off down the Autobahn for Salzburg, but and this was on May the 3rd. What a wonderful day that was. Our column was stopped, and I don't know the colonel's name, but a bird colonel came along and stopped various vehicles and said, "The war has ended." Well, anyway, we moved on after a brief hooray and then everything like that down near Salzburg. We eventually ended up doing nothing 20 miles from the Italian border. We went through Innsbruck and got down there. The town on our one side was off limits, the other side was off limits. The two hills on both sides, which you couldn't get up to it, was all right for that. Those weren't off limits. But we spent quite a bit of time down there, and being in the medical corps, I was given the opportunity to run some of the fellows back up to the field hospital at Munich, who needed some special attention, either from our dental officer or our medical officer. So we'd drive up there, and somehow we never found our way back directly, so we'd always take 2 days to do that. All of us, then they moved us into a small town called Ruhpolding. And now Ruhpolding was a small town, maybe 20, 30 miles off of the Autobahn between Salzburg and Munich. And fortunately, I had to go into town periodically for medical supplies, so I was able to enjoy the trip in and out. One day I was driving down the highway at full speed, around 60 miles an hour, and that's all the Jeeps would do at that time. And this car went zooming by me. It had 2 stars on it. And it turned out to be General, I think his name was Daly, who was our division commander. Ordnance was able to get a damaged Hitler Mercedes and a damaged Goring, and they put the 2 of them together, and the general took over. Until they found out back here, I think the story went, they found out about it back here, so they took it away from him and brought it back here for state bonds and victory stamps and that kind of fundraising. And then we went down, we were there for quite a while, then got orders to board a train and head back to Camp Lucky Strike. And up to this time, I was very fortunate with I really no major problems or anything else. But there again, it's in our annual here. We boarded boxcars is what they were, and they put a platform from the door back and the door front. That was our sleeping quarters then. And I don't know the name of the town, but I do know it was Friday, July the 13th at 3:35 in the morning. The Germans had taken over the control of the railroads, and we had 2 trains head into each other. And the division has, I don't think you can possibly pick it up. Maybe, can I move it forward for you?
If you want to hold it up a little bit.
Hold it up?
Yeah, that will work. Okay.
Well, anyway, either they get it or not, there were 10 fellows killed in this train wreck. My car, the car I was in, was just down here. The fellow on my right had a broken neck, and the other side he had a large scar put in his scalp. All I had was a dislocated back out of it. And so from there, though,
Did that raise your Purple Heart?
No, it wasn't even reported because they took care of me that way. Although I do draw a disability on it.
Oh, okay.
They do that. But I didn't get any Purple Hearts out of it. I wasn't asking for any.
Wow, I know.
Yeah, but from there, then the mess hall people were able to start fires. There were no lights any place, so we could see what we were doing. I wasn't aware of my problem until daylight, and the captain of, I don't remember his name, said, "Jack, what's wrong with your back?" And I said, "What's wrong with my back?" He said, "There's blood back there." That's when they realized that I had been scraped by it. But we moved back to Camp Lucky Strike. You know, all the camps were cigarettes, Lucky Strike, Old Goals, Chesterfield, the rest of them. And there they gave us the good news. We were going to go home for 30 days. And then we were going to report to Camp Cook, California, right on the ocean, where we could have 8 weeks of amphibious training to land D3 someplace in Japan. Then the bad news, estimated casualties, 2 million men. So naturally the morale wasn't too good at that time. But we got left on the boat, and we came back, and that wonderful, wonderful view of the Statue of Liberty, it was just a beautiful sight. I'll never forget that when we pulled in the harbor. And I was in Cincinnati on, what was it, August the 9th. Boy, I wish I would have known I was going to have to do this. I'm grouping for
That's all right.
dates now. And whatever day it was, thank goodness that Captain Harry, who was for that president of the United States at that time, decided to drop some bombs in Japan. And unfortunately, those people took the brunt, but we were not one of the 2 million that might have been a casualty, and war was over. So I still reported to Camp Cook, and we were there until, I don't even remember the happy day when I finally got discharged, and they brought us back to at Camp Atterbury in Indiana, where I was actually discharged, and came back to Cincinnati.
So you're
And
at
took
Camp Cook?
advantage of the GI Bill, which was probably the greatest thing this country has ever done. They've taken 13 million off of the streets and put them in school.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to the University of Cincinnati. There was two, wanted to study design. There were several schools. One of them was UCLA that I looked at that time. But being away from home, I decided I'm going to stay home. And I felt I got a real fine education from UC. At that time, it was called Applied Arts. It's now Design, Art, Architecture, and Planning, which is nationally known, internationally known, probably. So I was very fortunate. I've had a very shouldered life, I have felt. And my only problem is the back occasionally, but I can live with that. Yes.
What did you do since then, after you got your degree?
Well, my first job was in designing and packaging and checking with the Andrew Jergens Company. And I was with them, I guess, about a year when a salesman from a folding carton company said, Jack, I have something to show you out in the car, come on out. Well, he didn't have anything to show me. He just wanted to know if I would be interested in changing jobs. And because this fellow was the supplier of labels and cartons. And I joined, as a result, I joined a company called Richardson Taylor Globe, which later became International Paper. But it was about that time that my wife's father had passed away, and their company was in the manufacturing business, and the cousins said that they'd like to have me join them and handle their advertising and sales promotion work like that, which was right along my line for design. So I ended with refrigeration manufacturing when I retired at 60 years of age, when we sold the business. That's the story.
Let me go back and ask you a couple of questions along the way. You got a very cohesive story, I must say, chronologically very good. You talked about your vehicle that you had throughout the war. What was your vehicle?
It was what we call a Peep, but it was, now they call them Jeeps.
Oh, okay.
And it was made by Willys.
Yeah.
And that was, luckily, it was the best vehicle that Ford made some. I think the Willys held up the best.
Did you carry a lot of gear then with it? In other words, you're a medic.
Well, we carried two litters on that.
Oh, okay.
That is, Joe Fontana and the lead workman were on there with me. Now the two litters, when they were, we just put them across Broadway during the day. If we had a casualty, and when we had a casualty, those would be put on top. There were sections where they would be put on top of the hood. It was difficult seeing with them, but that was the best way to put a casualty. But that was the vehicle that I had, and we had.
Did you largely then transport wounded back to a
We
medical
would move
station?
back to our aid station, which was at B Company. And there we had a medical officer, two medical officers, and a dental officer. who, they were physicians.
Mhm.
So, and then if from there, if it needed greater other treatment that they couldn't handle, it was sent back to an aid station and a field hospital. Although at one time we had a vehicle that could perform operations, and it was about a 6x6, a normal vehicle, but I never saw it in use.
Really?
I
Did
think it's too much trouble.
you do much first aid?
Only before we would bring him to the.
Right.
Fortunately, I was blessed. I did not have too many I had to work with.
Mhm.
I was very blessed. The company, the whole outfit was that we didn't have that many casualties. So, but I would bring him back to the aid station then.
Mhm. Were you called on, I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but at Dachau, were you called on to help medically in any way?
The only thing we were told at the time was if anybody wanted a cigarette, that they could have a cigarette, but we had to use, we'd break our iodine and put a C on their forehead. Only one cigarette to anyone. But I really didn't see, I guess fortunately, I wasn't in where all the ovens were. It was the entranceway, that's where
Right.
where our outfit was stopped out. The only thing I can say that was the stink was awful.
You commented about Truman dropping the bomb. You're not unhappy that he dropped the bomb, right?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think that I would be here today being put on this film if it hadn't, with estimated casualties of 2 million. That doesn't mean dead, but casualties can, loss of arms, legs, or dead. So I don't know if I'd been here or not. I know I would have been doggone sick going across the Pacific in the rough seas.
What did you do all that fall? You were at Camp Cook after the war was over. You were there for several months.
You're right. We were there, and
Did you train or?
well, our officers that we had overseas had been changed, and we had a Captain Mueller. There was a real great officer also in charge, and we'd have sick call for the people there, and then he would send somebody up to Lompoc, which was a little town on highway, I think it was 101 or something like that, short distance away. And he'd order, and we'd all buy it, hot dogs and hamburgers and buns and mustard and beer. And we could, after a sick call, he'd get us out there and be in a real strict formation. We'd march down to the beach. Then we'd come back around 4 o'clock that afternoon. There wasn't anything to do.
Thinking back to your time in Europe, is there any other event that you might recall of some significance that you forgot to mention before?
No, I don't think so. I think I've probably covered it as well as I can.
Okay. All right. I think we certainly appreciate your coming in and.
There is one other thing.
Please.
I didn't bring the card with me, and I made a copy of it. It shows I'll bring it over to you so you can maybe take it with you. It has a photograph of me, my name, my serial number, and that as a medical representative, I carried this card in case I had been captured by in this case, the Germans. By the Geneva Convention, I would be given with this card to treat our own casualties. It's a plastic card, just like your credit cards are today. And there was one identifying feature on this, which we found out later. At the top of it, it says indemnification, I-N-D, and so forth. When questioned about that, we were told that was intentional, because they felt that if the Germans had duplicated this card, and they would have corrected the spelling. So that was the card we had for, in the event we were captured as a medical aid man.
That is interesting. It says for identification, that's what
Yeah.
it says up here.
He
Yeah.
showed me.
Then it says identity card, where it's
Yeah.
spelled right.
But see,
That's interesting.
they said, I don't know whether Germans would have done that or not, but that was what the excuse, whether the printer that put that in the press made the mistake, or whether this was an alibi for it.
Yeah, that can be filed with the.
Yeah, actually, I have a copy. so.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Hey, that's the reason I only made a copy of that. There was a plastic card, though. Any other, can I answer any other questions?
That's all, that's all.
Well, I welcome the opportunity to share these with you. It was a very, very interesting experience. One I don't want to take any kind of money for, and again, but I'm glad I had the chance to do it.
Well, John, thank you for coming in. It's a pleasure to talk with
It
you.
was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.